Our first session is Agricultural Emergencies, the Unknown. This is presented by Douglas Dick, who currently serves as the Chief of Superior Ambulance Services in Grove City, PA. Doug has been involved in fire, rescue, EMS for 45 years and was a founding member of Superior Ambulance. He has a wealth of knowledge in agricultural emergencies, having been raised on a 140-acre beef farm. Welcome, Doug.
These are the other people that are in.
So we can't hear anybody talking now.
Doug, you're good. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doug. We can hear you.
Okay, good. We're ready to go then?
All set for you.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Doug Dick. I'm Chief of Superior Ambulance Service, and today we're going to talk a little bit about agricultural emergencies, the unknown. So this screenshot here that you see, this is our 1/64 scale farm that we do a lot of agricultural training with. And we're going to kind of dive into what agricultural is and go through this today so that you have a little bit better awareness of those emergencies that you may face and how to handle them. I want to thank everybody for attending and participating today. So with that, we'll start this PowerPoint presentation and we'll get going. Okay, so with our course objectives, as you see on the screen, this is what
We can't see your PowerPoint.
no, I'm sorry. How's that?
Got it now.
Okay, so course objectives. So when we're done, you'll be able to define what agricultural is, give some examples of a variety of agricultural types, verbalize those common injuries. And for EMS providers, so you know these injuries are going to be unique to you. Those hazards that you see on an agriculture-related event, and also the factors related to ensuring situational awareness for sites on farm, and then actually ICS and approach the assessment planning steps for those farm emergencies. Okay, so what is agricultural? A science or practice of farming, including cultivation of the soil for growing of crops and rearing of animals to provide food, wool, and other products. Also, agricultural is, you know, when you look at it, going back to our great-grandparents and maybe our great-great-great-grandparents, they were subsistence farming. That means that they were were raising crops and livestock to sustain their family, maybe their extended family, what have you. Very little of that stuff was left in surplus to do trading or selling. And then the commercial agricultural, that's the large scale farming that you do for production, such as your stock farms where they're finishing out beef cattle to end up eventually in the market. So when we look at agricultural, and everybody thinks of agricultural, it's the farm that you drive by, but there's a lot of these things that we don't see, and a lot of them that are gaining great popularity. So when you see this, agricultural spans a variety of different areas, we'll talk about those. So we have these poultry farms. Some of these poultry houses, if you travel into these areas, especially like in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, down in the southeastern portion of the state, some of these poultry houses have thousands and thousands and thousands of chickens or turkeys in them. And, 8 weeks, these chickens will end up in the grocery store or on your table. Then we have the beef cattle. So, there's a lot of breeds of beef cattle. We have the Black Angus and the Hereford. Those are two of the primary breeds in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have other ones, but again, these beef cattle will end up eventually on your table as hamburgers or steak. And then we have our swine, and again, there's a variety of swine out there. You have the New Hampshires, the Berkshires, those types of breeds that people desire. And then our dairy. When we talked about dairy, everybody thought about the black and white cows, those Holstein cattle, which are predominantly what you see in the landscape. But there are other cattle. You have the Jerseys and the Guernseys, milking shorthorns, those types of things. Excuse me. But then a lot of people are milking goats. So we have the milking goats, and especially a lot of children that are problematic with drinking cow's milk. Goat milk seems to be a little bit more palatable to them. And then our rabbits, and I know everybody looks at these as Easter time and they're furry and cute, but meat rabbits are a big commodity in the meat market in different areas as well. And then beekeeping, and this is one that has gained great popularity. A lot of people are having beehives in their backyard that end up being somewhat of a little bit of a business where they sell their honey, especially if it is clover honey. And that's one of the big things you see in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is the clover honey. And along with these comes a lot of problems that we'll talk about. Then we have aquaculture. That's the rearing of fish, tilapia, and some of these aquacultures are a little bit more sophisticated. Not only are they raising fish or aquatic type food products, but they're also raising some vegetables on top of this. So these are some sophisticated types of setups. Then you have your greenhouses, and these can go from large greenhouses to smaller greenhouses and structure wise, raising plants, flowers, shrubbery for sale. And then we have our orchards and vineyards. So we have the apple orchards, peach orchards, and then the vineyards, the grapes, especially in the northeastern part of, or northwestern part of the state of Pennsylvania, your vineyards up into New York. Your apples and your peaches, a lot of those are still kind of sporadic across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And with those all come different types of situations. And then our crops. And I'm sure everybody's heard the input. What is input? That's the stuff that it takes to get these things to grow. So those ears of corn, what it takes to get that corn stalk to grow, the wheat, the oats, the hay. And roughly those costs for inputs today, your fertilizer, lime, and those types of products, fuel, have increased 30 to 50% for the people that are growing these crops. These crops are used, this just isn't cow feed. People think, well, that's the farmers raising that for cattle feed. You know, a lot of the corn ends up into cereals, the wheats, the oats, things end up into food products as well. And then our vegetables, and again, these have gained popularity of people wanting to know where their vegetables are coming from. Of course, the good old pumpkin patch that at Halloween time, people want to go out and pick their pumpkin and have that experience. And with that, a lot of those places that have the pumpkin patches also have like a corn maze, and those corn mazes have grown in popularity as well. So when we looked at all those agricultural type things, and those were farming, and there's more to the agriculture we'll talk about, but how does weather increase injuries? And this is one of the things that we need to think about, and nobody's exempt from this. As we know, in the fire EMS scenario, we're all short-staffed. The farmers are short-staffed too. Nobody wants to do labor-intense work today. So when you look at the weather and you get a nice day, there's that increased sense of urgency after a long stretch of bad weather, which we have been having our fair share of it here in Pennsylvania lately. You try to get those chores done, those tasks completed in a timely manner during those breaks. Sometimes you don't have enough staff during that, or you have a variety of things going on that you need to accomplish. Then what happens? People leave their guard down. They start moving quickly, trying to get everything done. They go, go, go. And it is nothing at this time of year that some of these farmers that are planting fields with corn, soybean at this time of the year are working 20 hours out of 24 hours in a day. And we all know that's not conducive to what we should be doing. On top of that, when things break down, they pick up their good old duct tape, their binder twine, and that's how they fix the things temporarily, and they don't really have time to do those good repairs. And with that, that causes problems. So what kind of safety concerns do you see? So you look at this guy's standing on the back of this truck. If you look at the ground and how uneven it is, you know, there's some safety issues here from a rescue standpoint and a pre-hospital care provider that you should be concerned about. So just look at that for a couple seconds, try to get a mental picture of this and what potentially could happen. So vehicles on uneven ground, that person standing on tons of grain and the height of the vehicle. So I'm gonna go back to that slide now that you kind of see some of the dangers we picked up. So think about this. That's roughly about, from the ground level to the top of that is about 7 to 8 feet. How are you going to get this person out of the back of that vehicle? You know, what equipment are you going to need? And that looks like it's on a driveway or a roadway, but actually that truck could be back several hundred yards in a field somewhere. And you may not be able to drive right up to it like you do in a residential area, you know, and unload your stretcher, unload your gear, and walk into this patient. So this will be a challenge for you. So whoops, sorry, got too far ahead of myself there. So what does staffing play in farm injuries? So we know what staffing plays in EMS with trying to get everybody to cover shifts, do transports, run 911 calls, and do everything else we do. But if we have a poor season, you know, we've had a lot of rain, poor growing season, or production, anything that, you know, gets thrown to us. A lot of places have to lay off workers or cut workers' hours. So by doing that, laying off workers or cutting their hours, you're short-staffed. And when you're short staffed, we all know what happens. Everybody that's left behind has a heavier workload. And that requires you to do more than what you normally do. Or training people into jobs they are not familiar with. So when we talk about injuries and deaths, these two little folks that are trying to push this 1,500-pound round bale of hay probably are not trained to do the job. And then using family to help with work tasks. So on most farms,
Come on, Maddie. Come here.
if most farms they're a family run or something, it's everybody in the family is participating in it, and everybody's doing multiple tasks. Then we talk about what's the role does farm equipment play. So you're unfamiliar with the equipment. So as far as EMS providers or firefighters, do you know how to shut this equipment off? So when you look down at the lower left corner of this John Deere tractor, this thing is basically self-propelled, run by computers, and we know how computers work. At least I know how computers work because I am not the IT person. But one little glitch in that computer or satellite signal or anything else can actually cause that tractor to stop or go faster or go off track of where it's going. And then trying to get it shut down if there's an emergency that you need to get to the operator of it. Now, when you look up at the top in that old steel-wheeled tractor, those were simplistic. They had a key, you turned it on, pushed a button, it started, or at least you hoped it started. And if not, if you looked in the front of it, there was a crank, and you cranked it over until you fired it up. But majority of fire and EMS personnel are very unfamiliar with this type of equipment. The problem with the old machinery, there were no safety switches. So if you jumped off your tractor kept on running. And a majority of those older pieces of equipment, we had inappropriate care. And then you had that carelessness when you're running it. And we always hear this. I've done it this way forever. And not only on farms do we hear that, but we hear it everywhere. EMS, fire. A lot of people don't want to change for a variety of reasons, whether it's because my grandfather did it this way, or my uncle did it this way, or my dad did it this way. But people are really reluctant to make change, and that causes problems. So how does the geographic location of a call affect injuries? So think about this. When you're going on a 911 call and they give you the address of, let's say, 123 Main Street with cross streets of cross street A and cross street B, you have a pretty good idea where you're going. On the agricultural settings, the rural environment, it's going to take you longer to get there. Maybe getting access to the patient is going to be prolonged. That is if you can find where you need to go. So some of these large agricultural areas, thousands and thousands of acres, they tell you go to Smith Road and Black Road and we're back in the field. And when you get to Smith Road and Black Road and you look at the field, you can't see the end of the field. So how do you know where to go get your patient? No one knows there's a problem a lot of times until it's too late. A lot of these agricultural emergencies, especially equipment entanglements and stuff, this person's been out in the field entangled in this equipment for hours before anybody realizes that there's a problem. And just those little simple injuries can actually become life-threatening. We all know about control bleeding. And if we don't control bleeding, usually all bleeding stops. If somebody gets caught in a piece of equipment and cannot free their limb and they're bleeding, it might not take them 5 minutes to bleed to death, but they may be trapped in this piece of equipment for a couple hours, and it's a slow, painful death for them before anybody realizes that they are in trouble. So we look at statistics, and this should make everybody pause. Age 15 to 24, over half the annual death rates in agricultural settings. And every day, as we're doing this class right now, there's going to be 33 children somewhere across this country involved in an agricultural accident today. Whether those be minor or major, they're still involved in them. So the leading cause of death for children that are living on the farm is a vehicle. So those farm children, it's a vehicle of some type, whether it be a tractor, an ATV, a hay bind, something like that. That's what's going to cause their death. Now, when little Johnny or little Susie invites their friends from school over to your farm, their chances of becoming a statistic of a fatality will be animal related. And the reason why is, if you look up here in the top right, them little goats, everybody likes to play with the baby animals and, you know, go pet the cow or go pet the horse, those types of things. And that's where our visitors on the farm get into trouble. So in Pennsylvania, the 2020 data for fatalities, there were 39 of them. Now, when you look at Pennsylvania, that's a large land mass, but 39 fatalities to the farming industry is way too many. 25.6 of those were under the age of 19. So the 2020 data is a significant increase over the previous 5 years. And again, in agricultural, and this is, everybody should be aware of this, males are more likely to be a fatal injury than females. So with those 39 fatalities, here's what happens. If you are a family-run farm, when there is a family member that becomes a statistic, a fatality, there is a good chance that within the next 12 months, that farm will shutter and be out of business. And if it's the key person, and we're talking 19 years of age, and the 19-year-old could be one of those key people, but chances are that they're not. But if that's number is somebody that's 59 years of age, and they're the key person on the farm, and they end up being a statistic, a fatality, chances are that farm will stop operations pretty much immediately and will be shuttered. And we see this, that these farms, they have a significant injury, it's family related. Now they got to deal with that, maybe hospital bills, how to get back on their feet. And it's a struggle. And you see these absolute auctions, liquidation auctions of all these farms. So we're kind of in the peak time frames right now. The spring, you're gonna see a lot of this equipment. Every year, there's what they call the farm or the farm road safety awareness programs. Pennsylvania State Police participated in it. Pennsylvania Farm Bureau participates in it. But about the motoring public and coming up behind this equipment. So as you can see, that piece of equipment is almost as wide as both lanes of highway. And we see a lot of this. This is a planter. You'll see these planters in the spring, sprayers, fertilize equipment, those types of things. And they're moving this stuff from field to field. And again, going back to some previous slides about the weather, they may be moving this stuff first thing in the morning, middle of the afternoon, late in the afternoon, even after dark, just to try to get their tasks done while they have good weather. And, we have specific crop timelines. So right now, everybody's trying to get their ground prepared to get corn in the ground. Ideally, we'd like to see the corn put in the ground by the end of May. And everybody's going to be struggling this year to get that done just because the weather that we have had. Then we talk about the fall, that's harvest season. And we got a couple slides coming up about that. So peak number of fatalities. October is the worst month. And that is because it's harvest season. Weather is very unpredictable. Daylight is getting limited, and it's rush, rush, rush. And there's a very, very small time frame to get these crops harvested, whether it's corn or whether it's the apples in the apple orchard or the grapes in the grape vineyard. It's crunch time, and this is where we see a lot of fatalities in the month of October. For children and those adolescents, that 25.6% of those kids under 19 years of age, June, July, and August. They're out of school, leaving their bookwork behind, and now they're doing what they probably really like to do. That's out, playing in the barn, helping do chores, tending to animals, and they get into trouble. When we look at these fatalities, the majority of them are attached to a farm tractor or some other off-road vehicle. And the reason why is pretty much on every event on a farm tractor is involved. You had them planting crops, you had them moving equipment. They're the source of the power to get everything done. And that's where we have our number one leading cause of fatalities. So how is this used? How much does it cost? So this is a planter that will plant small grains. And just to kind of give you an idea, when we talk about the cost of this equipment, anybody that's in the fire rescue, you need to be very conscientious about how much this stuff costs. When we talk about, buying an ambulance, and an ambulance is $200,000, or we went out and we bought a new engine, and our engine is $500,000. Well, this farm equipment is no different. And this is the livelihood. This is what these farmers are going to make their livelihood on. And keep in mind, this piece of equipment here is probably only used maybe a week out of the whole year. So it's pulled behind a tractor, and the cost is anywhere from $19,000 to $45,000 for that seeder. Piece of equipment that's only going to be used about one week a year, maybe two if it's a big operation. So if we tear that piece of equipment up, we just caused a lot of problems financially and economically for this person. So then we have our little animals. Down on the bottom are little baby pigs, and everybody thinks these are cute and cuddly until they grow up. And then we have some of the other unique animals, alpacas and things that people have been getting into. So animals in agriculture are broad-based. They're all the same. And if anybody's a horse person, you know how horses can be. There is no such thing as a bomb-proof horse. There's no such thing as a bomb-proof animal. So avoid those quick movements or loud sounds. Moving into an animal's blind spot, and this is every animal is just like a human being. They have their own little quirks of what they like or dislike. So always try to look around. We talk about, that scene survey, situational awareness. When you go to one of these calls, whether it be at a small farm, large farm, or any type of agricultural thing, always be situational awareness. Look for an escape plan. What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if that happens? And again, animals create association with incidents, good and bad. So a lot of our cattle that we have on our farm are pretty accustomed to my son, myself, my grandkids. They get fed every day. They know that if somebody comes out of the barn with a bucket, it's a good time. However, in some of these larger ranching operations, especially in the Midwest, where these people are running thousands and thousands of head of cattle, those cattle only usually have two interactions with people. Number one is in the spring when they're coming into the corrals, the cattle chutes to be branded, ear tagged, immunizations given and everything else, and then they're turned back out in the range land. Then the next interaction those cattle have with a person is when they're brought back into the corrals, put over the scales and put on a stock trailer or a cattle trailer and headed to a feedlot or to market. So they associate those interactions as bad. If you have anything that goes on with animals, majority of areas have a CART team, County Animal Response Team. In Pennsylvania, those are funded by Regional Terrorism Task Force. Some of them are small animal CART teams, some of them are large animal CART teams. But get to know those people, get to know what their resources are, and even if you may not have it in your county, but your neighboring county might have it. Veterinarians. I will tell you that it is very difficult right now to get a large animal vet in a situation. They are very limited. They are very busy. So in your pre-planning, when we talk about this, you may want to have a vet or a couple vets on your call list. And then the other experts are those other farmers, you know, the neighboring farmer, the guy that deals with these animals maybe on a basis or deals with types of animals. Folks at auction barns are really good at dealing with animals. So those are some resources that you can have if you get in a situation with animals and you have a problem. So those animal call outs, animal versus human. So we talked about those this springtime, cows are calving, and ladies, you can probably attest to this. You have that mother instinct. You're going to protect your child, and no different than that mother cow or that horse or that goat, that mother pig. She's going to protect her babies at all expense. And that is where we get into the animal versus human problems. A lot of times we see animal human conflicts when they are being moved through corral systems or pasture systems, through gates, or loaded on stock trailers. And keep in mind, you could have multiple animals involved. So, you know, you have a dozen mother cows with calves on the ground and you're in the pasture field. You might want to rethink going into that pasture field until somebody can render that safe. Another one of the things that why CART teams came out was because of horrific natural disasters, floodings, and those types of things, tornadoes, and a lot of animals. There was nobody to take care of animals or anything else. So that's where some of the CART teams were established. And then you have fire and structural collapse. About 5 years ago, we had a barn collapse, a roof collapsed on it was a beef cattle operation with horses with a young girl entrapped in the barn. So not only did we have the structural collapse issue to deal with, we had animals to deal with, both cattle and horses, and then we had an injured person. These are very complex situations to deal with. It's not something that you're going to walk through the door, walk over the threshold of somebody's house and take care of the patient. Then when you're on the highway, motor vehicles, so if you're driving, look at those trucks that are going by you. You see one of those big animal haulers. If they have pigs in it, you could have several, 50 to 100 pigs in it, cattle, 20 to 50 cattle in it. Think about it, if you're in a situation like Interstate 80, 79, I-90 in Pennsylvania, I-81 out east, it doesn't take long for traffic to get backed up at a regular motor vehicle accident, let alone having a bunch of animals running around the interstate system or your highway. And not just talking about interstate system, but these things come through towns as well. So if you think about your town, what would you do if you had 20 scared cattle running through your main street of your town or something? So what danger do you see here? So this is a John Deere tractor pulling a square baler. And we have the gentleman in between there. And again, time is essence. You know, when you get hay cut, you have a small window of getting it put into square bales or round bales, what have you. So that equipment's on uneven ground, kind of going uphill, which is not uncommon in Pennsylvania. Person standing between the tractor and the baler. So the question you should be asking, is that tractor running or is it shut down with the brakes locked? So we'll go back to that slide. So you think, you think about that. That's on an uphill slide. That gentleman's working on it. If it's running, you know, brakes are only as good as the brakes are. There could be a mechanical failure, and now you have a disaster. And think about the injuries, the types of injuries you're gonna have with this person. You could have entrapment underneath the tractor. You could have entanglement if he would slip and that baler's running, slip, get drugged right into the bale. This is going to be a very difficult scenario for most people. And on top of it, good chances are he's not close to the road. So you got to figure out how you're getting to him and getting him back to where you need to go. So tractor safety reminders, ROPS, those are the rollover protective structure, and seat belts. Now, keep in mind, the rollover protection device only works if you have a seat belt on. And a lot of our older tractors, is this one down on the right corner, that old farm all, and we call that a tricycle wheel tractor, so it has narrow front end. Those things are very dangerous for rollovers, as you can see. It's not in a position that it should be in, but those usually do not have a ROP system. The tractor on the left, although it has a cab and it does have some protection, those become problematic to try to get somebody out of as well. Usually, again, repairs are not up to par. And if this tractor's upside down, especially this old farm all, there's a good chance that thing's still running. So with it running, now you still have energy going to the rear wheels spinning. There could be stored energy in the system, and it may be very difficult to shut that tractor off. And some of these older tractors are really complex to how you shut them off. We have an old John Deere tractor, and you can turn the key in any direction you want to turn it, and the tractor will not shut off. It has basically, you choke it out. There's a lever you got to pull up, and that's how the tractor gets shut off. So knowing some of this old equipment is going to be a key thing, because that's what you're going to see. A lot of these family farms, especially the smaller ones, they don't have the money to go out and buy a new tractor, so they're buying the used ones at auctions. Make sure that the tractor and any attached equipment is stabilized. So we talk about stabilization of these things. It's going to take you truckloads of cribbing. Okay, most rescue companies that I've ever been involved with do not carry enough cribbing or stabilization equipment with them on their first due rescue truck. And this is going to be where are your resources, especially if you get some of the bigger equipment, what you're going to need. So when we talk about rollovers, as you can see, this is how fast it happens. 15 seconds. So from the time this tractor starts to roll over, whether it goes backwards or sideways, it takes roughly 15 seconds, and it's in a position that it should not be in. It's either going to be on its side or it's going to be wheels up. It's kind of like a turtle. You know, you look at the turtle and you flip it over on its back, it's kind of hard for the turtle to get back up on its feet. In the same way with these tractors, and roughly 15 seconds, and it's too late. And especially if there is no ROP system on this tractor, or that person is not seat belted in. And that, with motor vehicles and stuff, we push for the seat belts, and the same thing with tractors. This thing starts rolling, you're getting ejected off of it, and who knows where you're going to end up. Those side overturns are the most common. That's somebody that's going a little too fast around turns, driving too close to slopes or those shear lines. And we see this a lot. People brush hogging, and they look at this little bit of a hillside or an embankment, and they think, oh, I can handle that. That's not too bad. And all you need to do is break traction on one wheel. So one wheel needs to come off the ground, break traction, and that thing's going to start rolling. Raised buckets on these, if they have a front end loader, it kilters the center of gravity, and especially if the bucket has any material in it, whether it has stone, dirt. We see this a lot with guys with front end loaders with bale spears moving big round bales, and it's, the center of gravity is fluctuated and it causes it to roll. As you can see in this guy, he does have a ROP systems, and obviously he is seat belted in. So although his tractor's upside down, he's not crushed. He may be injured, but he's not crushed. So rear overturns. This is where people use equipment for something that's not intended for. This tractor is not a skid steer, or this tractor is not a tow truck. So we see these types of situations where one tractor is trying to free another tractor that's stuck, or we see tractors being utilized to pull large trees, large logs out of the woods. And the cable, rope, whatever they're using, chain, is usually hooked above the drawbar because of how 3-point hitches are in tractors and everything. But now you have that center of gravity again, pulls up the wheels. And as I said, 15 seconds later, this tractor is going to be upside down. And it doesn't help if they're working on an incline or in a muddy area. Again, if they're trying to pull out another tractor, it's a good chance that the ground is not stable, and they're just putting themselves in another position that they shouldn't be putting themselves in. So how is this used and how much does it cost? So this is a big case tractor. This thing would be used for cultivate, plowing, disking, moving big equipment. This is a good sized tractor, 4-wheel drive. Not too many people are going to go out and buy one of these, let alone some of these farms have multiples of these. So when you look at it, case tractor, it's 415 engine horsepower. So when they look at tractors, they talk about engine horsepower and PTO horsepower. So engine horsepower is 415, PTO at the power takeoff is about 315. That tractor alone weighs 32,200 pounds. So 16 tons, just the tractor. On top of it, fuel capacity of 163 gallons of diesel fuel. So add, that diesel fuel, if he just filled up his tank at 8.8 pounds per gallon of liquid, what it weighs. And that tractor is just a mere $482,014 if you go buy it today. So I want you to look at this, and we'll go back to this slide, that tractor. Some of the things that we don't think about. We talk about agricultural emergencies. What happens if the operator in that tractor has a stroke? What happens if that operator in that tractor has severe chest pain or becomes unconscious? How are you going to get them out of that cab? So those rear tires are 8 feet. From the ground to the top are 8 feet. So you're looking at about a 9 to 10 foot height with that narrow step that is roughly about 10 inches, 12 inches wide. And the door only opens up about halfway. And not to insult any of the farmers, but a lot of them I know are pretty good sized guys or good sized girls. And so you have them in this situation and you have to extricate them. think about what you need to do. So we talked about those power takeoffs. Those power takeoffs are the transfer mechanical power to the tractor. Some of the older equipment, as we said, have no safety switches or anything. So when you get off the seat, it continues to run. And there's two power takeoff speeds. One's 540 revolutions per minute, and one's 1,000 revolutions per minute. So to kind of give you, a little bit more in depth here, we'll show you a picture after this. But that 540, that means that that shaft is going around 9 times per second. And the 1,000 RPM is going around 16.6 times per second. So here's what happens. Somebody's unaware that the PTO is engaged. So we talked about that guy in the baler gets out, looks at it because it's plugged up with hay. He didn't shut his tractor off. Tractor doesn't have any safety switches, or he's disconnected the safety switches because he's tired of his having to shut the tractor down, and then once he gets back in it, turn it back on and everything. Kind of unfamiliar with the power of the PTO shaft. So keep in mind, again, that thing's going around 540 times per minute. You're working too close to an unguarded shaft. The shaft protection on those things, right now, I don't know exactly what the costs are, but the last one I bought 2 years ago was $57. I'm sure that they've gone up a little bit, but $57 to protect yourself. It's not too bad of an insurance policy. Wearing loose clothing, long sleeves, hoodies with strings in them, and you're getting too close to the unguarded shaft, and you end up in this. So, again, the shaft, when you get caught, you're going to go around the shaft 540 times in 1 minute. So your body will have no forgiveness. We'll talk about those shafts. Those things are hardened steel. You can't cut them with your Hearst tool or anything like that. So if this person is entrapped, if their limb still may be attached to them, and their limb may not, their clothing wrapped around here. So think about how complex this is going to be to get this person out of there. What's your medical care that you need to worry about? First thing is control any bleeding that you control. If this person is still a viable patient, and get IV started, airway management. You need to think about some crush injuries, maybe TXA if you carry it. This patient may need blood if you can have access to blood to get to them or what have you. This is not going to be a 5-10 minute patient care event or extrication. Other injuries. So when you talk about other injuries, medical conditions causing the trauma injuries, the decap, BTLS, amputations, and death, then prolonged extrications and intricate extrications. So look at this. This is a batwing mower. So that's a big John Deere tractor on its side with a cab. You have a batwing mower, which that thing there's actually 3 PTO shafts on the mower, and then a PTO shaft that attaches to the tractor. And then it has at least 6 hydraulic lines to it. So hydraulic lines under pressure, and that is in a very bad situation. When you talk about stabilization, you need a tractor trailer load of cribbing or timbers or whatever to stabilize this. Not only the tractor, but the mower. This is going to be all hands on deck. And it's not a matter of a lot of people say, well, we can just go up there and break the glass out of the back window or cut the roof off of the cab. That's not how it works in agricultural stuff. You start cutting things, you may the integrity of the piece of equipment or whatever, you may compromise it greatly. So we talk about mechanical hazards again, just to give you an idea. This is New Holland round baler in a PTO shaft. So where you see that shaft that comes out into that big round drum, that's what's powering the baler. So there's roughly about 14, 18 inches between the shaft and the drawbar where you hook onto the tractor. So think about this. Your body is going to go between that space. If you're caught in that PTO shaft, your body's going to go between that space roughly 540 times every minute that is running. Not to gross anybody out, but it's going to look like one of those Pennsylvania white-tailed deer that you just saw splattered on Interstate 80 by a tractor trailer. So those injuries, again, entrapped in equipment. As you can see the headlines, farmer 67 survives more than a day trapped in the hay baler. It's a big round hay baler. You know, those medical conditions causing of traumatic injuries. And again, starting with our DCAT BTLS, you could have amputations, or that person could be, it could be a death, and rather than a rescue, it becomes a recovery. And these things will take a long time. Prolonged extrication, intricate extrication. This is hardened steel. A lot of these pieces of equipment you have to take apart by hand with simple tools. So as EMS providers, think about the care. If this person's still alive, especially a whole day, what type of medical care do you need to be thinking about? Is it a crush syndrome? Do they need IVs? Do they need blood? Do you need to call in a physician, possibly to do a field amputation because you can't get them out of the equipment? And once again, these things may be only accessible by a four-wheel drive vehicle, or maybe you have to get another tractor with a wagon to transport your personnel, transport all your equipment to the scene. And I know everybody talks about air medical. Sometimes you cannot land a helicopter in these situations just because of location, the land terrain, etc. So you really need to think outside the box. And as I tell everybody with these, have plan A, B, and C, and then have plan D and E, because A, B, and C may fail, and you might have to go as far deep as D and E for your plans. So anhydrous ammonia, you know, we see this being used a while ago. Very dangerous inhalation hazard, but what dangers do you see here? This is a big anhydrous tank. So the child riding on the tank. And as much as we'd like to think that that would not happen, it does happen. Those exposures to chemicals. So most of the anhydrous leaks that we have are failure of equipment, you know, coupling when they're either filling the tanks or while they're using the anhydrous to put on the fields, you have equipment failure. And then the height from the ground. You know, they fall off this tank. So, you know, you think about it. That's being pulled either by a tractor or a pickup truck. She falls off. You see those big two wheels there. She ends up being run over underneath this tank. If the little girl falls off the tank and is clear of it, she's going to hit the ground. You're talking roughly about a 7-8 foot fall from the top of the tank. So those types of situations can turn into disaster really quick. Something that everybody thought was fun turns into a problem. So we talked a little bit about anhydrous. So it's plant fertilizer stored under pressure. Really has a sharp penetrating smell. The problem is lung irritation to severe respiratory injuries and ultimately death. When anhydrous is mixed with water, it develops an alkali that's really chemically burns the tissue. And when I say burns, it's, you know, like almost like a disintegration of tissue. The big thing is lung irritation or that severe respiratory injury. So on the lower left, you see that anhydrous plume. And if we all can go back to our hazmat awareness or hazmat whopper or whatever hazmat class we've taken, you know, the rule of thumb. So not many EMS agencies that I know are carrying SCBAs on their ambulances. You know, so if you're the ambulance that rolls in, you know, this could be the simple call for a motor vehicle accident, no entrapment noted, unknown injuries. You may or may not have a fire department responding with you. And if you're in a rural area and you're a staffed EMS agency, you may be the first ones on scene versus fire, rescue, or even the police. We need to really reiterate to all our personnel, especially at this time of year, if you are in an agricultural area, about some of these dangers. Because if you get out of your ambulance and you walk into that plume of anhydrous ammonia cloud, the chances are you will end up dying. And there are some videos out there, some training videos of how bad this stuff is. And I cannot reiterate it enough, because right now, anhydrous is being used a little bit more this year than others, just because of the increase in cost of fertilizers and phosphates and different things, that potash that they're using for field. So it's, you know, problematic. Again, general chemical safety reminders. Again, getting back to use your hazmat training. Farm materials are often concentrated, so they're buying them in 55-gallon drums. They might have a pallet of it. And the problem is, I might only use 10 gallons out of a 20-gallon container. And rather than having that 20-gallon container sitting around taking up space, I'm going to take that chemical and put it in maybe 4 milk jugs. And I'm going to take a black marker and write on it. And eventually that'll fade away and we have no idea what's in it, or I forget what's in it. We see that all the time. We talk about information being in your ERG book, you know, your orange book, or on MSD S sheets. Yeah, when this product was bought, that information was on those MSD sheets, but who knows where they're at. And again, if you have no idea what this material is, you have no idea how to treat your patient. Some of this material is seasonal. Everybody's heard about, you know, Roundup and everything that Roundup problems it causes, and it's probably one of your most noted materials being used. And it's being used right now today. Guys are spraying their fields if they do no-till planting for corn, and depending on the concentration of that. Also, these chemicals, how they're stored. You may go to the farm for a fire call and the building's on fire. Majority of farms don't have their buildings marked with hazardous placard signs. And again, you might have a jug of something in one corner, a barrel of something in another corner, a pallet of dry chemical in another corner. And we all know in hazmat stuff, all this stuff separate may not be a problem. But if it gets mixed together or water gets on it, or, you know, airborne, we have a major problem. And as providers, we kind of leave our guard down, especially EMS providers. And I'll just say this, EMS providers usually aren't paying attention as much as I think they should. You know, we have that situational awareness. We talk about it, and most of them are worried about getting shot at or punched, and they're not thinking about all the other things that could be a hazard around those. So those common chemicals, you have those pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodicides, insecticides, fertilizers, veterinarian chemicals. So 2,4-D weed killer, you know, that's used a lot, especially in hay production, because you can spray this on your hay fields, and the only thing it kills is your broadleaf weeds. Doesn't kill your grass or anything. And then when you look over, you know, the MSD, what it's used for, storage and disposal, all those things, how are you going to care for it? And this is one of the things that I tell everybody, if you can get there and ask the person what they're using, you know, what's the name of the chemical? And it's, I'll go back to medicine. It's like EMS. You know, we have hundreds and hundreds of medications out there that people are taking. EMS providers are able to administer, but what are the side effects? How do they work? What's their purpose? And it's no different than these common chemicals used in agriculture. How do they work? What's their purpose? What's their side effects? And then we can throw into that, if you have an exposure, how should this person be treated? And what are their signs and symptoms? So what's the dangers do you see here? So this is a grain cart. So these grain carts are pulled by a tractor out in the field when they're harvesting grain, whether it be corn or soybean. Depending on the size of these things hold tons and tons and tons of grain. And I equate these to a mini silo or a mini grain bin. There's a lot of problems to them. So looking at that, this guy's big about this. He's 500 yards out in the middle of the field. He's all by himself. He's up there trying to level the grain off with a shovel. So dangers, the height of it. You're talking about 12 foot from the ground to the top and standing on tons of grain. And we'll talk a little bit about grain entrapment here in a little bit. But if he's by himself and anything happens, it's not going to be a good outcome. So there's grain bin rescues. And there's been such a push on grain bin rescue over the last couple years. And I'll tell you what the push is. So with the grain prices fluctuating as much as they do, and if anybody looks at the commodity markets, you know, corn fluctuates from $3.50 a bushel up to $7.50 a bushel. And soybean fluctuates as much as that. So if you had a field of corn and you were under the time frame of trying to get it harvested, after you get it harvested, if you don't have no place to put it, you have to take it to market. And the market, especially at harvest time, prices seem to drop a little bit because there's such a surge of product out on the market. So you might only get a fraction of reimbursement for your grain as you could if you held on to it a while. So a lot of grain bins have gone up, and some of these are sophisticated systems. This picture here is a pretty sophisticated system with your transfer stations, your grain bins, your dryers, and everything else. Some farms have a couple of these small grain bins, you know, 40,000 bushel grain bins, and some other ones have a half a dozen of them. So that entrapment, that's partly submerged in the grain. So there's two terminologies here that you really need to make sure you understand. Entrapment, that means you have right at that moment a viable patient that's partially submerged in the grain. Engulfment, that means that they're completely submerged in the grain. Chances are that may become a recovery. For an adult, we'll take a normal 160, 180 pound male patient. Again, I say males because males are typically the ones that are becoming the statistics in agriculture. In less than 20 seconds, they will be fully immersed in grain. So think about that. You see that aerial truck in the center of the picture, it doesn't even go halfway up that grain bin. And in our geographic area of where we cover, we have a couple big grain bins that are 150 feet tall. Your average ladder truck in my area, the tallest one's 100 foot. So I'm about 50 foot short of getting to the top of the grain bin. If anybody goes in there and they get engulfed, takes less than 20 seconds. I don't think I need to explain to you what the outcome is. There's a decrease of oxygen. As you go into the grain, you end up having crush injuries from the grain. You have respiratory hazard, the dust, the pollen, the hazardous gases inside these grain bins. And then on top of it, if that grain bin is almost empty, in other words, you have about 10, 12 foot of grain at the bottom, you have the potential of getting entangled in the augers in the bottom of these grain bins. So in the grain bin, there's an auger system that pulls the grain out of the grain bin. So the grain goes into the top, fills it up. So when they start unloading these grain bins, they pull the grain from the bottom. There's an auger system. Some of these are 6 to 8 inches in diameter augers, kind of like those PTO shafts, except they're not moving as fast. But they pull the grain out into a hopper system that ends up loading up trucks. If you get caught in that auger system, it's like a meat grinder, and it's going to pull you right in. And it has no forgiveness. It will not stop. You will not stop it. The only way you're going to stop it is if somebody kills the power to your grain bin system and your augers. So how's it happen? You know, grain bins, they develop this crust. Again, they fill them from the top. They develop this crust, and you know, they're trying to unload the grain bin. Grain's not coming out. So somebody goes up. Again, we've done it for years. I don't have to put a harness on. I don't have to put a rope on. We'll just get up there with a shovel, a stick. We'll push the grain and everything and bust up this and get it moving. Problem is there's a void. You know, it's like a crust and there's an open space underneath it. It's kind of like walking out on ice. When that happens, they go straight down. So as you can see, in 5 seconds, you're up almost to your thighs. In 10 seconds, you're above your waist. In 15 seconds, you're at your armpits. And at 20 seconds to 25 seconds, you're under, completely submerged in head. This isn't a thing that you just walk up and pull somebody out. So what does it take to pull out a 165-pound person? So if you're up to your knees, and some people that think that they're Goliath and yeah, they work out at the gym, but it takes 170 pounds of energy force to pull somebody out if they're just up to their knees. If they're up to their waist, it takes 300 pounds. And if they're up to their neck, it's 625 pounds. I will tell you, we have a device that we use, and the 170 pounds, some people have been able to do it, but they've never been able to do it any more than that. The 300 pounds of pulling this person out of the grain will not happen. So that's why it's imperative that if you go into this grain bin, if it is a true entrapment, you need to stop, and you need to have protective harness on or protective rigging so that you don't end up like your patient. So we look at those operational considerations. There's some videos out there. There's one, it's a YouTube video that National Geographic did of a gentleman by the name of Eric Baker. He was entrapped in a grain bin. The only thing that, actually he was engulfed in the grain bin. The only thing that saved him was that he had an avalanche mask on. So at a yard sale, because he had allergies and stuff, he bought an avalanche mask and he was wearing it, but he was engulfed. But when I talk about operational considerations, I want to think you think about your geographic area, your service area, how many responders you have, whether it be fire, EMS, or law enforcement. At some of these incidents, there's 120 to 150 people on the ground working these rescue events. This is an intense, in-depth operation, both rescue and medical care. And again, is it rescue versus recovery mission? As it says, some of these things can last hours, and that's what we hope for, that they last hours, but some of them have lasted days. And this is where in your planning, you need contact specialty resources. Do you have a ropes team in your area? Do you have a confined space team in your area? Do you have an ag rescue type team that have specifically trained for these types of things? Your manufacturer of your grain bins, you know, a lot of these, and I'm just, you know, there's a lot of manufacturers out there, but whoever put this grain bin up, there's probably a big sign on it. And, you know, ours say Brock. And, you know, do you have the phone number, contact information for the dealer and the people that constructed your system, because they're going to be the experts of your system? And again, I cannot reiterate, this situation is very dangerous for responders and the patient. One bad decision can alter the outcome. And this is truly where incident command and working together as a team will direct the outcome of these calls. And if you have any grain bins, whether it's a singular grain bin in your area or multiple grain bins, I cannot stress to you enough that you should go talk to these people, take a tour, get an idea of things, of the lay of the land, because grain bin entrapment, grain bin engulfments are in the increase. Nationwide Insurance, as a lot of people know, gives out grain bins, rescue tubes to fire departments every year. We're part of their program. We help them do training. And there's a big push. Unfortunately, those grain bin rescue tubes are expensive and they only have limited sources. So in Pennsylvania, every year, there's only 2 or 3 of those grain bin tubes give out to people in areas. That's a piece of equipment you need to know what if you have it, and if the people that have it know how to use it and how fast it can get there, because that's one piece of equipment. A grain bin rescue tube will help direct the mission of this call. Safety precautions, limit the number of people in the bin. I say you need 3 people in the bin. So each one of these panels, depending on how big the bin is, you may have to do haul line with a rope. Some of the bigger bins have a spiral staircase that you can walk right up the staircase with your equipment. That's a luxury. And if you have a grain bin that has one of those spiral staircases on it, you need to thank the farmer and thank the guy that put it up, because those truly are a godsend. But 3 people in it, you need somebody that is medically trained. And again, somebody that's not afraid of heights, somebody that's not afraid of close environment. You're going to be limited lighting. So when you do these plans, you know, do you have headlamps of some sort that you can put on your head, your helmet, whatever you have? Safety harnesses, you don't need anything fancy, some generic, safety harnesses, rope to get tied off. You need some matting to put down on the grain. A lot of people have thought outside the box. They use their plastic backboards, or if you take the orange colored plastic barrier that you use for fencing, you can unroll that, but something to give you a footprint so that you can step on it and you don't sink in the grain. But you need a medical person in this, oxygen, and you need to get an IV started. If you can get one IV started, great. If you can get two, great. Fluids, don't overload them with your fluids. And oxygen is the big thing right away. Make sure that machinery that is unloading this bin, in other words, that auger system is shut off, locked out, tagged out. Because you don't want the auger system to be running and pulling the grain down, because it's pulling the grain down. It's going to pull your patient down and pull you down as well. Make sure that the people have the minimum protective equipment. Again, this we take as common sense, but this is something we have to reiterate. Safety glasses, face mask of some sorts. You're not going to be able to wear an SCBA in one of these grain bins. It's going to be too heavy, too bulky, but some type of a face mask, respiratory protection, a harness, an air monitoring device. And as you can see, that is a grain rescue tube, and they're pulling it out with a bucket. We're pretty fortunate with ours. We have an auger that runs by a drill. So what dangers do you see here? So you have people working cattle. They're going through a cattle chute, and this farmer's not really paying attention. So multiple animals, you got pinch points on your equipment, crushing injuries from the animal. And again, usually this is an intense type operation of moving these cattle, through the cattle chute, because they're being immunized, brand, what have you, doctored, weighed, and it's a fast-paced, chaotic event. And it only takes one of these 1,800-pound beef cattle to ruin your day. So that animal housing, again, have trained people there, or people that are used to working with these animals. Always have a way out, and again, that escape route. Look at where you're going. Look at how the gates open and close. Look at the doorways. Approaching the animal is a big thing. Don't come from the blind side, because these animals have acute hearing. Their ears are always swiveling. They may not see you, but they hear you. And I will tell you that you will not outrun the kick from a horse or a cow from the rear end of it. Understand animal, or the colorblind, sensitive to light changes, sensitive to loud sounds. And again, the maternal instincts changes their behavior. Couple things that are sensitive to light changes are swine. So if you go into a swine barn and all the lights are turned off, it's pretty quiet in there. You flick the light switch and the lights come on, you'll need earplugs. So again, getting to know these animals and how different things affect them. They are no different than we are. Light changes human behavior, loud sounds change our behavior, and those maternal instincts change our behavior. So actually think about some of your human counterparts and how they act, and not that we're calling them an animal, but it's the same thing. What dangers do you see here? This is a tractor pulling a auger to unload grain from a wagon or a truck into a small grain bin or feed bin. So yeah, those electric lines and unsteady equipment, and those augers are really unsteady. But the main thing is, where we see a lot of problems is people forget to lower them. They're trying to pull them through their farm or down a road. They come in contact with the electric line. And we all know how that works out. Machine storage. Okay, usually this equipment's separated from the animal housing. You got this stuff packed in there, and usually they put it in on how much they use it. So the stuff that's not used much gets put clear in the back. The stuff that gets used all the time is up front. Most of this equipment has fuel in it. Again, being conscientious of the height of this equipment, when you're moving it, the width of it. If you're in a building that has concrete floors or something, the floors can be slippery just by, a little bit of oil or chemicals. And, this is a Quonset hut. This is metal. It's kind of, limited airflow, so you get a ventilation concerns. And again, this equipment is big and tight together. So if you're trying to move this and there's anybody with you, you need to make sure you know where they're at. Your visibility from atop this equipment to the ground is very poor, and your peripheral vision is going to be poor with this stuff as well. So we talk about manure pits, and there's some pretty horrific stories out there about dangers of manure pits. So again, don't rush in without the right gear, self-contained breathing apparatus, air monitoring devices, and harnesses and lifelines. And actually there should be signs posted, but I can tell you that a lot of places do not have signs. You have your 4 problems of manure storage: your methane, your ammonia, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide, all from your manure pits. So these are real stories. Mennonite family die from deadly methane gas in farm manure pit. So it's methane's odorless, explosive, flammable, causes death by suffocation. It's light, so it's going to be near the top of the pit. Many examples of more than one person being affected. So what happens here is, why you say, well, how can a whole family die? One person goes into the pit, they don't come out. Another person goes in, they don't come out. And now it's the domino effect. That ammonia into, you're looking into this manure pit. This is a concrete pit. So sharp penetrating odors, heavier than air, and it irritates the eyes and respiratory tract. And then that carbon dioxide, again, it's odorless, heavy, it settles kind of to the bottom of the pit, cause that labored breathing, drowsiness, headache, and eventually suffocation. And hydrogen sulfide. So gas from manure pit kills 5 on a dairy farm. Father and son killed by pig manure pit fumes. So, again, it smells like rotten egg smell. Again, if you're around enough, your olfactory senses are kind of paralyzed. It's heavy, it settles to the bottom. And again, all these things cause dizziness, headache, nausea, and then a death in minutes. And at the bottom, Pennsylvania man and his 2 teenage sons found dead in a massive manure pit. A lot of people go, well, why do we have these manure pits? Well, with regulations, DEP and everything else, farmers have to be very conscientious of when they're putting their manure in their fields. Again, manure is, to build up the soil. So they store it so that they can put it on their fields at the right time. When the weather's permitting and everything else, they got to worry about water runoff and everything. And so these pits, they can be basically an earthen pit, or they can be a structure that looks like a grain bin or looks like some small silo. And, again, these are very dangerous, and people can get caught in them. Not only in those manure containing pits, but in some dairy barns, they have manure pits underneath the cow stanchions. So the manure is all scraped and it comes up to the end of the kind of the runway and goes into an underground pit. And a couple of these situations where animals were caught in a manure pit, and people tried to go in and rescue the animal, and ended up becoming a fatality. So you're not swimming in this, or I hope you would not elect to swim in it, but things do happen. And, they should be fenced in. This guy has his fenced in pretty well. He has that, heavy cattle fencing, but then you see those 2 top lines are high tensile, And some people even put like an electric line over to, if somebody decided they wanted to climb the fence, they understand that they shouldn't be climbing it. So we talk about components of situational awareness. You remember that perception, that awareness through your senses, what's going on around you. And that all should start when you're dispatched to these calls, your situational awareness. Comprehension, processing of the information. So if your dispatcher is giving you information, are you processing this information and are you forming a plan? And that anticipation, the projection of what is about to happen. So when you pull in, what you see, what you were told and what you see, are they together? And as you can see, this guy with his, this is an old family tradition, little kids riding on tractors, and I'm sure most of us have been on a tractor, whether it be a big tractor, a little tractor, or a lawn tractor. Keep in mind, it's easier to bury a tradition than burying a child. And I can tell you in these situations, if that tractor starts rolling, both of those people are coming off that tractor and it's not going to be a good day. So how is this used and how much does it cost? So this is a case baler. Again, use seasonal, late spring, early summer, maybe into the early fall. So large round and square baler. So these cost between $56,000 and $70,000. And so, most people are doing large bales of hay now just because of they're less labor intense. We don't need people to help us move small square bales or anything else, but those hay bales can weigh anywhere from 750 pounds to 2,000 pounds. They can either be large square or large round bales. So working together to create a pre-plan. I want to challenge each of you. If you are in a agricultural area, and most of us probably are, meet with your farm owners. Ask them to take a tour of their facility. Discuss safety measures and equipment that they may have in place. Post emergency contact numbers and train together. When I say work together, we all talk about we're a team. Well, we need to train as a team. Because if you get called to a farm or an agricultural emergency, you're gonna need your team. You need your firefighters, your rescue personnel, your specialty people. You need law enforcement there. Think about behavioral health, because if this is a drawn out, intense rescue, you need to think about your providers that are on the ground and everything that they are struggling with. Maybe your Red Cross or Ladies Auxiliary from the fire department. So this is going to be no different than one of those natural disasters we've seen, whether it be flooding, hurricanes, or tornadoes. Emergency contact numbers. Equipment dealers, tractor, grain bin, hay baler. Have numbers that are available 24/7, 365. Most of these equipment dealerships have some type of service trucks, specialty equipment. Your nearby farmers, they're the experts. They do this stuff every day too. Your technical rescue teams, and again, what are their capabilities? What equipment do they have? Your rope rescue teams, are they high angle, low angle? What are their capabilities? And extra equipment. So as you see, these guys have been at a grain bin and they're starting to unload grain. So our neighboring farm has 170,000 bushel grain bin. If it's full and we need to unload it, I need a lot of triaxle trucks to get this grain moved. I need skid steers. I need excavators to get this grain moved. Because once it starts flowing, you don't stop it. It's kind of like water, and you break the dam, it's hard to plug the hole again. So those are the things that you need to have in plan. Those dispatch questions, anybody that's a dispatcher, These are the questions you need to ask. I understand, there's EMD protocols and things, but kind of thinking outside the box. And those that are responding on the call need to ask questions and be very clear on the information you're provided. So what's the location of the patient? What's the best access point? Will somebody be at the entrance to meet us? What's the type of call? This might come in as a vehicle accident on a farm. If it comes in as a vehicle accident on a farm, you should be thinking, what kind of vehicle? Or it might be an animal. Location of farm maps, if necessary. And again, when you're meeting with your farm families, ask them if they have maps. And then the number of patients you potentially have, because this is going to dictate how much resources you need. That scene safety and size up, identifying the mechanism of injury, the nature of the injury or incident, identify the potential dangers. So for yourself, your partner, bystanders, patients, obtain situational history, begin to set up ICS. I cannot reiterate, and in these situations, you need incident command set up immediately. Identify the impact of the environment on care. And I can tell you this picture here of a fire, you're not going to stop the farm family members or their neighbors from trying to get cattle out of that barn. They're going to run in, they're going to try to get their cattle out, what have you. They're going to try to protect what they can protect. This is their livelihood. If this is gone, they're gone. So how is this used and how much does it cost? So it's a John Deere combine, harvests corn, soybean, wheat, oats, 625 horsepower. The grain bin holds 410 bushels of grain. It weighs 30,170 pounds, so 15 ton. It's 12 feet from the ground to the cab. And it's just a mere $826,386 if you buy it today. If you look at that head, that is a corn head on that. You can also put a grain head on it. When those heads are on those heads are anywhere from 30 to 40 feet in width. Not a very big cab. Again, if the person has a medical emergency in it, you're gonna have a problem getting them out. This is not going to be your normal extrication of bringing somebody down from the second floor in a stair chair. Mutual aid, again, equipment, trained teams, that manpower, knowledge, specific personnel, farm apparatus, vet, tractor mechanics, other farmers, ICS. Again, knowing what your resources are. And you need to know what your resources are before you get this call. So if you don't have an idea of what your resources are in your area, today's the day to start planning that. Again, entrance and egress routes. Just because you see a roadway going across the field doesn't mean that you can take your equipment across that roadway. I've actually seen a fire truck try to go across the farm roadway and ended up nose deep into a big ditch because of water washout and everything. So it's not good. EMS providers, your patient care and assessment. And again, team effort here. Your general impression level consciousness, ABCs, primary assessment, your priority, patient history, getting a secondary assessment and destination facility. Again, you may have to be working in the mud, the rain, the wind, the heat, or upside down to take care of your patient. Again, your extrication, is this a disentanglement? What equipment do you need? Extrication route, extrication equipment, transport mode, and transport destination. Do you have specialty rescue equipment available for you? If you do, get it on the road. It's easier to cancel it than get to the scene and realize that you need it and you don't have it and it's not on the road. And then that termination of call, accountability of all responders. You need to make sure that we all go home. Collection of all your equipment, debriefing after the call and follow-up. And again, these can be intense. These are going to be your neighbors. These may be your friends. So we need to think about that, the SISMs teams, mental behavioral health folks for getting them involved and making sure that everybody does go home and we're all okay. So what can you do to wrap this up? Remember, agricultural emergencies are unique. They are not your motor vehicle accident, and they're not your chest pain calls. Know that various things will challenge you and that you're gonna have to be able to adapt and overcome. Take additional classes specific to agricultural. Collaborate with other agencies for the unknown. Identify the strengths and weaknesses with these agencies. Identify special resources that are available. And above all, as I said, contact your neighbors who are farming or in agricultural related businesses. When we talk about agricultural related businesses, your Rural King, your Tractor Supply, your Agway, the places that sell products to farming, your implement dealerships. You know, your implement dealerships, go take a tour of their operation, ask some questions about the equipment. And above all, stay safe. And thank you for what you do day in and day out to protect your communities. And my information is there for contact information. If you have any questions about agricultural rescue classes that we do or sponsor, feel free to contact me. And God bless and have a good day.